Welcome to the Popcorn Podcast with Omar Moore. Recently, I spoke to actor, writer, and director John Turturro about his latest film, Fading Gigolo. It's a film he directed, wrote, and starred in. It's a very funny movie which also stars Woody Allen, Vanessa Paradis, Sofia Vergara, Sharon Stone, Tonya Pinkins, and Liev Schreiber, among others. I highly recommend the film. Here now is a portion of the conversation I had with John Turturro.
You know, Woody's character is a bookseller, and my character is a guy who works with his hands. He does various jobs. Right. And so I thought of the guy like my character is kind of like a samurai guy, you know, who's just, you know, really likes women, but never committed. Maybe his father left when he was a kid, so he's never been in a long relationship. And but he really likes women. He's very comfortable with women, and he's not a guy who's cocky, but he's like confident. Like he's not looking for the end result all the time. So I thought that would be interesting with Woody being more the guy who's a salesperson or whatever, you know. But there's rituals that go on with it. But I like things that are physical without them being just violent.
Right.
There's a great deal of respect you have for this too in your films, and in this film, the respect you have for women, the character. Your character has this great respect, and you have great respect.
I think I love women, and I love you know. There's nothing wrong with, you know, lust and sex and all that stuff too. But I think that women, in order to understand a woman, it's for a man a lot of times it's a big mystery, you know, and certainly love is a very big mystery. So there's an unlikely love story that happens in the course of it. But I think, you know, people who can listen to another person and can let that person allow themselves to come out, then you're starting to appreciate someone on different levels, not just on one level. You know what I mean? And that's something that interests me. And I think, you know, as you get older, that does. And then lots of guys, they're really not that they're interested in getting it or whatever. And I don't think they actually like being with women that much. I actually have a lot of women friends. And I like work with women designers and producers. I enjoy working with women. I really do. And I feel freer, honestly. And there are guys that I feel free with too. Mm-hmm. But, you know, they have to have like a strong, you know, like feminine, masculine side. You know what I mean? I just don't like, it's like innately, you know, macho. That doesn't, I don't like being around it, and it doesn't bring out the best part of me.
That is very false, too.
It is very false.
There's a lot of false bravado, and there's a whole question about masculinity. And it may not necessarily be percolating in your film as an overall theme, but I'm just meaning in general in society, how men are supposed to, quote-unquote, behave as men. What is our model for that? Yeah,
well, I think we don't have a lot of models for it, and even models of women being free, it's so in your face sometimes. You're like, whoa, I don't want to see everything, man. Right. I want to discover a little bit. I would like to go in, and that's why I chose a woman who was oppressed as being one of the major characters, because I thought, wow, that's something interesting to go up against. But yes, I think we're all victims of being, you know, sold very base ideas of things. And, you know, you've got to be exposed to other kinds of representations of that, whether it's in a book or a magazine or, you know, and I don't see it that often, honestly. Mm-hmm. I really don't see it that often. Mm-hmm. I find a lot of times there's a greeting card mentality, and that doesn't get anybody to say, wow, yeah, I never thought of that, man. You know, it's like, you know, you can meet a great person and they can have the worst job in the world. You know, you can meet a very wonderful person who's a prostitute. It could be, you know, I mean, and that person could have gone through a lot of things.
Absolutely.
And so you can't assume that you're better than someone else or you know more than that. And I think the representations of it don't really thrill me a lot. And when I see something that's really good, I'm like, wow, that was really, I have to think about that, and that I was entertained by or moved by. And so I don't try to start out, heavy-handed, but, little by little, I mean, these characters I could write another 90 pages like that for, because I really liked all the characters. You know what I mean? And I was interested in them, and they have some real life counterparts sometimes. And sometimes that was after I wrote them. I met, but I think it's a hard thing, and especially with aging too, it can be a hard thing, and people don't realize that there's this need, for human contact or companionship that it never goes, man. It hits you in puberty, and then you can be 85 years old and lose your, and you're like, wow, people are still dating and looking for them.
Sure.
And falling in love.
And that gets so mocked in our culture, in this country, and in other countries that may be different.
Yeah.
I know that and I want to congratulate you over the last few years, you've had a dual citizenship, I've read. So
yeah.
Well done about it, congratulations. But in our culture, we don't value elderly people, it seems, or at least in some parts of our America.
I think sometimes people, it's interesting because everything has been skewed down to younger people, but like I've screened this movie for a lot of younger people, and they like the movie, and I'm thinking, well, why do they like it? It's not about them. And I was thinking, when I was 20, I didn't want to see movies about 20-year-olds. I want to see movies about people, 35, 40 years old. I want to know what's going to go on, what's going to happen to me. And I try to put these characters in situations that they had never been in. So all of a sudden, they're in a brand new situation. So in some ways, they're 18 years old again. Because reinvention is part of life, and being in these situations again is part of life sometimes. And so that interested me. And not that I wouldn't be interested in making a movie about blue is the warmest color or something like that, because that had a lot of complexity to it. So, but I think, people just don't get it a lot of times, and they're sold. I mean, for me, I can meet women, that I had on my wall when I was 12, and I'm still like, wow, man, I would like to go out with them. You know what I mean? It's like, they're maybe 75. It doesn't matter to me, man. I'm like, that would be, I still think they're beautiful. They're older, that's all. And I don't know if they are interested in doing that, but maybe some are. But I think, in America is very, sometimes can be very short-sighted. And when you skew everything and you feed that, it's like giving people, junk food. It's like those documentaries they make about junk food.
Sure.
You keep feeding them that. That's not a good thing to eat every day. You know what I mean? So, the world is complex, and there's all kinds of great stories, and about all different, and there's things that happen when you're young, but that happens a lot because it's hormonal. Later on, you start to understand life in different ways, not master it, but even if you're just weathering it, you know what I mean, or surviving, there can be little slithers of wisdom.
And I feel the same way that you do about the idea of exploring more when you're older and finding out more about people and the beauty in people.
That's
that
right.
Resides deeper than the skin.
That's right.
As you grow older, is a more sensory and very sensual experience, and you capture that very beautifully in this film too.
I tried to a little bit. I tried to do that, with the visual palette and everything like that, because the whole world, word fading, a fading photograph can be beautiful. It can be something really beautiful, because it makes you want to say, what was there, initially, before it's restored or something like that. And I think we're all part of the world that way. And we're all, people, physically, I don't know what your peak is when you're 21 or 18 or whatever. And then, then you've got to develop in other ways.
Sure. One last thing, because I was just giving
Yeah.
Going back to the gentrification, because I wanted to ask you about this, and you brought it up about gentrification.
Yeah.
Your good friend Spike Lee has talked about this a lot. What are your thoughts on the issue? Because you're from Brooklyn. I lived in Brooklyn for 20 plus years before moving out here.
Where did you live in Brooklyn?
I lived in Flatbush.
Uh-huh.
And then actually lived also for a little while in Manhattan.
Right.
And that was in the '80s.
Right.
And
I lived in Manhattan too. I lived on like the lower Upper East Side, like on First Avenue. Well, I think, like I lived in Park Slope since '88, so I was moved in like the first wave of people. I think what happens, things get boring. You know what I mean? And the price. It's like I couldn't afford. Like I have a brownstone. I wouldn't probably live where I live now. And I don't want to just be with all people of a certain socioeconomic class. I like diversity. I like cultural diversity. I grew up that way. So I don't really like suburban world. You know what I mean? And I definitely think that, yes, when there's a big give and take of that. You know what I mean? And, Spike certainly spoke, I think he spoke really, passionately because like his dad, some people called the cops on his dad because his dad was playing music. I mean, they could have rang his bell and said, listen, I can't sleep.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or, the guy's playing music. So, but there is that. There is, when new people come in, all of a sudden they assume this is, and, you have to try to become part of the community. And I think when you lose like all these little establishments too, that helps you also say, well, this is, where you go shop, these are the people. But when things get pushed out, it's easy for everything to change really fast.
Sure.
And we've seen this in so many neighborhoods
sure.
all the time. And it's hard to keep the balance of saying, well, here's the old people who are here, here's the new people who are here. And, so I've seen it happen. I mean, I've seen it happen in lots of neighborhoods, Spike's experience was different than mine because he moved to an Italian neighborhood. I grew up in a black neighborhood. I grew up in Hollis, Queens. And then we moved to a white neighborhood. And because we bought a house. We lived in apartments. But we were like, so I've seen gentrification happen so many times.
Wow.
And then the neighborhood where I lived changed. And became a very integrated neighborhood. And my mother never moved out. She stayed her whole life. When she lived there, she was, So we were never the people to move, but I was always seeing that. I always grew up around that. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the problems that people have is like when people have interaction with each other, then you get to know each other. That's it. And if you don't get to know each other. And that's it. And so when you have the advantage of that, you have an ease.
Right.
You know what it is.
Sure.
And you also know what it is to be the minority sometimes.
Right.
And if you're always the majority, you don't know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I think Spike said some true things. I always worry about him when he says things because there's a part of me that's like protective about him because I feel like, because this is a very strange business. And I think, it's easy for people to be closed-minded towards other people, too. So I'm always like a little, honestly, I feel like we're like the same age, but I'm always a little like, protective. And I realize why he does certain things. He says it and stuff like that. But I'm always like, because he's got to go out and hustle, too.
Right, absolutely.
He's got to, get things off the ground also.
Right.
But there's a lot of truth in it.
Do you talk to him? Have you talked to him? I'm just curious if you talk
we didn't talk to him about this.
Right.
But we've been through a lot of things together.
And you go to Knicks games together.
Yeah, we go to, I may have my own seats, but we go to, and sometimes I sit with him, but we're still good friends, and, if he has, matter of fact, he just changed agents, and he, called me up, he wanted to know, and I helped him, he's with my agent now, and so he's a close friend, but we've been through, we made some movies together that were, whether it was racial stuff, anti-Semitism. I mean, I've been in the middle of it. You know what I mean? I've been the guy who's been in the middle of the shit. You know what I mean? I'm in the middle of it. You know what I mean? I'm like, what are you talking about, man? They're like, what are you guys talking about? I'm like, oh my God.
And you've been in more of his films than anybody else.
Yeah, but I've been in the middle of those controversies.
Right.
I've been the guy who's in those controversies. Right. I mean, just as an actor,
Right.
I mean,
they don't really.
Yeah, they don't really understand.
Pino,
and sometimes I always go like, Spike, you got to put this line in because that's going to help you in the end. And sometimes he cuts it out because of rhythm, and then you go like, see, I know what they were going to say.
Right.
Because anyway, he's a good friend.
Having Speaking about politics, though, the new mayor, Bill
Yeah,
Blasio.
I know Bill.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware. Okay, so
He came to, I know him when he was the public advocate, because he
Right.
tried to help me. I was trying to help all these people when my acting teacher, they had all these studios, artist studios in Carnegie Hall.
Mm-hmm.
And they all were very, including Bill Cunningham, the photographer.
Oh, of course, Bill Cunningham.
And I was recruited by my acting teacher, Bob Modica, to help all these people who were 70, 80, 90, to be able to get extensions or try to stay there, because they were pushing them out to make even though they have a big Carnegie Hall tower, they wanted it to make it a school. And, I went to these people, we're talking about age, and said, listen, why don't you let them finish their journey?
Mm-hmm.
I said, because a lot of them are so old anyway. And they said no to me, and he helped me a little bit, and I got extensions for some of them. But we protested, and all these people, photographers, painters. They used to have a whole dance studio, and these was things that Andrew Carnegie, you could, if you were a writer, you could apply, and if you got in, you had this artist studio, and people there 50 years. Some people lived there, and they pushed them all out. But I got them, and Bill tried to help me. I got to know him a little bit, and then I met him at Passione when we did it. He brought his family, and I was like, yeah. So I'm a supporter, and I wish him well. It's a hard job.
Yeah. And because the reason I bring him up, he definitely brings a new face, and definitely, I think, a breath of fresh air to New York.
Yeah.
Do you think that the prior administration also affected the gentrification issue?
Oh, well, he was definitely, listen, he did a lot of good things as the mayor. He was really good in many ways, but absolutely, he was pro-big business, and absolutely, it definitely, I think some gentrification is good, but the thing is, it's hard to protect people. It's hard to have both, It's like the Barclays Center went up, all these people protested, and, it's been okay. It hasn't changed the whole downtown of Brooklyn, but I think it's nice to have a different point of view. Of course, when de Blasio got elected, I heard from a lot of people, oh, he's not going to be able to handle it. I was thinking, oh, so only one kind of person, only like a really, and I understand Bloomberg's independently wealthy, and he's a little freer to do whatever the hell he wants to do.
Sure.
But, that's always been a hard job, and Bloomberg's was the exception of one of those guys. Most of those people were a career politician. So, I'm for him.